So you've been thinking about buying a house, but you're worried about the millions of people that lost their home in the last 3 years of foreclosure. How does that not end up being you, right? We get it. Jamie Millhiser, Fairway Mortgage. We feel this stress and this fear from a lot of our first-time homebuyer clients, and it needs to be discussed. You need to understand what happened back then with lending in the mortgage industry and know that that day is gone, that we don't do things like that anymore. The best way for you to figure this out and get in the know is to understand what went on and that it doesn't go on now. So what we're going to talk about in this video real quick is how we did it, why we did it, and what we're doing now in the mortgage industry to protect you as a first-time home buyer. So you've been kicking it around, you've been thinking about getting a house. You should be. It's a great time. Prices are all-time low, rates are all-time low, but you got that haunting question. How did this happen? How did all these foreclosures happen, and how do I know it's not going to happen to me? 4 real quick reasons for you. Number 1, you've heard of it, subprime. Subprime mortgages, man, those were tough. People with poor credit or less than perfect credit were buying homes with no money down at pretty competitive interest rates, at least for the first 2 or 3 years they're in the property. And then those interest rates would pop on adjustable rate mortgages, and an $800 mortgage payment would turn into a $1,300 payment overnight. People were ill-advised, and that American dream of home ownership clouded some of their decision-making, and they took on some risky loans. Wall Street did, and so did the consumer. We all got burnt. Number 2 was the financing options. They were insane. We were doing purchase loans as mortgage bankers and brokers at 125% loan to value. Somebody buying a $200,000 house wanted to borrow $250,000 to pay off a car and some credit cards and even walk out of the deal with some cash to do some home improvements. Have at it. It was a crazy time. Number 3 was no doc or stated income loans. Basically, we did loans with as little paperwork as your name and social security number on an application. We booked the deal. We weren't worried about verifying income. We weren't worried about verifying assets. And once again, that word keeps coming up. It got real reckless. It got a little loose. And people bought homes that shouldn't have. And then they lost the homes. The last thing is the lack of quality control in the industry, which is crazy when I tell people about this. As an industry, we lend out millions and billions of dollars to American citizens lending on 1 to 4 family residential properties. And to be truthful, there wasn't a lot of quality control. If somebody did tell us what they made, our industry didn't take the measures to actually verify that. We didn't verify social security numbers, we didn't verify your income, and we didn't double check your assets. So a lot of deals were booked with false documentation in them, leading once again to a bunch of people qualifying for homes that shouldn't have. So now let's talk the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Why? Why did this happen? Why did Wall Street and the mortgage bankers do this? Why did the government allow it to happen? Why were American citizens going into these loans knowing that they were probably going to have problems a couple years down the road? Well, the first answer is real easy. Greed. Greed on our side of the desk and greed on the consumer side of the desk. We wanted to make money. The product was there, supply and demand. The consumer, the client, the borrower, they wanted a home, and they didn't really care what it took to get there. So that happened too. The second reason is the constant appreciation of real estate, or the illusion that real estate would constantly get more valuable, would appreciate. You know, it reminds me of a saying I heard probably 2003, 2004. That was, invest in land, because God isn't making any more. Nobody thought that real estate or land would go down or depreciate. And oh boy, it did. And lastly, the how. How is our industry? How is Wall Street? How is the government? How is everybody protecting people buying homes today so they don't end up in the same trap everybody did in the last few years? Well, let me give you just a quick synopsis of that. My middle name is Red Tape. My office is on Compliance Avenue, and I'm dating a gal named Due Diligence. But seriously, the how. How is our industry doing this now? What are we doing different today versus all that reckless stuff I was just talking about between 03 and 08? Well, first thing is, we can't do anything that looks like those loans I was talking about. So that's great. You couldn't even originate it because no one's going to buy it anyway. Now, there's also been a lot of reform that our industry's gone through, adding laws, adding legislation to protect you as the consumer. There's legislation against predatory lending now. There is laws and legislation in regard to responsible lending practices. We all abide by something called the Loan Quality Initiative since October of 10. And they've actually come out with an agency in summer of 11 called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau that's aimed and targeted strictly at American citizens looking to borrow money. Credit has gone to a more of an old school mentality, which is great because once again, it protects you, protects your family, and it protects your investment, that house, and the money you're putting into it. That old school mentality includes the 5 C's, which are credit, collateral, capacity, cash flow, and character. So I hope this alleviates some of your concern, because if the reason you're renting is because millions of other Americans prior to you lost their homes to foreclosure, that isn't a reason to stay in your apartment. Reach out to good people. Surround yourself with good realtors and good lenders, and find out exactly what your underwriting process would look like and what kind of house you can afford to buy. The American dream of home ownership is alive and well. It's just deep in hibernation because of some of these fears. I hope this answers some of your questions. Jamie Millhiser, Fairway Mortgage. Thanks for watching the video. Hey, follow me on Twitter